awesomeness. I'll kick it off. Hi, everyone. Thanks for being here. This is our afternoon session on Wednesday. I am Pat Casella, Executive Director of USDLA, and today's moderator will be Mr. Bill Ryan, who's also on our advisory board. And our presenter will be Alexandra Salas. She is also on our USDLA board, and she is our Director of Communications. Bill, I am turning it over to you on this one. I've moderated the last three in a row, so I get to sit back and just make sure everybody talks and stays collaborative here. So
Well,
all on to you.
your job is to provoke conversation. We'll let you
Provoke
do that. And you're
conversation.
good at that.
That's
But
right.
we also have with us, who's also very good at provoking conversations, is Alexandra Salas. She's an entrepreneur and the founder and CEO of I said that wrong, DelMarVa Digital Learning Association, a nonprofit that is dedicated to expanding education access, futures, literacy, and innovation. She has more than 20 years of cross-sector experiences and specializes in student success, digital learning strategy, and organizational transformation across universities and mission-driven organizations. And today she's going to talk about futures literacy, that ability to imagine and use the future for decision making. That offers a transformative lens for rethinking how educational systems plan, innovate, and adapt. This session is going to explore how this futures literacy can strengthen educational policy by promoting long-range planning, encourage inclusive and equity-centered decision-making, and expanding our capacity to navigate uncertainty by engaging together in an inquiry that leads to proactive innovation. I will turn the reins over to you, Dr. Salas, and thank you for doing this today.
Thank you. Well, welcome everybody to Futures Literacy as a Catalyst for Education Policy and Innovation. The reason, or the inspiration rather, behind focusing on futures literacy is because I find that literacy, all kinds of literacies, whether it's info literacy, computer literacy, digital literacy, AI literacy, they are all durable skills that are critical to our ability to navigate the present and the future, while still remembering and learning from lessons learned from the past. So I see futures literacy definitely as a catalyst to education policy because when we get together and we are able to have a conversation and think about future scenarios and how we might act, react, converge, go on a quest to find solutions. That is part of the process of futures literacy, and it definitely has an impact on how we shape policies. So, with that said, I'm moving my slides, I think. There we go. All right. So, futures literacy, as it is defined by UNESCO, is the capability to better imagine and prepare for possible futures. Now, it's not fantasy. This is a reality. It's think about strategizing for anything that you may be doing, whether it's in the classroom or anywhere else. You know, you are looking and preparing. You're researching. You're tapping into your current knowledge base and expanding what you know, finding out what you don't know, so that you can effectively plan. So this type of thinking empowers individuals and organizations to anticipate change and adapt creatively. So by challenging assumptions and exploring these types of alternatives, futures literacy has become a pathway because it fosters innovation and resilience in this world that we're currently living in. So with AI, we see talk here, work with AI. It's everywhere now, and so AI is also part of this conversation. It's one of those future literacy trends that are happening as we speak and changing. So AI acceleration and emerging technologies, as you know, are revolutionizing everything, revolutionizing industries, demanding new skills that we have yet to prepare for. But this is where education comes in, as building that bridge, that being that connector with the workplace and leading to a shifting workplace with increased global mobility. Meanwhile, digital equity and access gaps continue, but they are affecting opportunities and inclusion. So, with rising mental health needs and climate change, coupled with the demographic shifts, all of these areas require a sort of adaptive strategies and resilient solutions that futures literacy helps one to develop and evolve. So let's take a look at the present perspective in policies. Policies typically they focus on immediate benefits. Um, Sometimes they neglect long-term impacts and sustainability, and sometimes they become outdated. Think of the last time that a policy was updated. It wouldn't be far-fetched to say that um, accessibility policies and AI policies are the ones that are at the top of the list for many education institutions at this time. But other policies, sometimes they collect a little dust after a while, and when you go to revisit them, typically during some sort of assessment or self-study, you realize how long it's been. So this present-oriented bias can result in short-sighted decisions that can undermine um, present and future generations. Addressing this requires integrating foresight and future planning into policymaking to ensure that there are balanced, forward-thinking solutions for enduring societal welfare. So, as I indicated, many policies are reactive, right? They address immediate crises and not always thinking about long-term solutions. And it takes a lot of effort and time and dedication to reprise and and revise them. Funding is sometimes unlimited to short-term cycles, and they hinder sustained impact. Innovation in policymaking is constrained by existing systems and structures, and they limit transformative change. There are also equity concerns that are frequently recognized only after their negative effects have already occurred, which kind of delays the, the focus on finding solutions and repairing what needs to be. So, how can future literacy help education? Futures literacy can equip us as educators. They can equip administrators. They can equip policymakers to anticipate and address emerging educational challenges. It promotes innovative policy solutions by encouraging long-term thinking and scenario planning. So integrating excuse me, futures literacy education policies becomes then a process that's more adaptive and resilient. And it better prepares students and systems for uncertain and rapidly changing environments. So even getting your students involved in thinking about the future and using futures thinking processes and systems thinking can support navigating these uncertain times. It encourages anticipatory governance. It reveals blind spots and assumptions. It helps us identify equity risks before they emerge. It also, this futures thinking way can help support innovation beyond the current constraints, and it can enhance long-term education planning. So, following UNESCO's model, there are three types of futures, right? There's the possible, there's the probable, and then there's the preferable, right? So which one do you like? So possible futures explore what might happen, considering all the scenarios. And then probable futures focus on what is likely to occur based on current trends. Preferable futures envision the outcomes that are most desirable, guiding actions towards positive change for society. So just to kind of revisit, so predictive futures are what is likely. Then you have alternative futures, what is plausible, and then transformative futures, what is possible. So think of policy innovation. Policy innovation lives in this transformative space. So this is why it's um, it's a good combination to consider futures literacy futures thinking when looking forward on how policy, what types of policy adaptations would need to be made or new policies would need to be brought forward. So, as you know, being educators, there are several areas in education policy. Education policy impacts curriculum development, shaping what students learn and how it's delivered. It guides teacher training and professional development to improve instructional quality. And additionally, policies address equity and access, ensuring all students receive fair opportunities regardless of background or location. So, futures literacy can impact the digital learning policy and infrastructure. It can influence teacher development and staffing models. It can it can also advocate for different types of credentialing and skills and micro learning. Consider futures literacy as a pathway towards better understanding and addressing accessibility and universal design. Um, Equally, you can see how futures thinking has also impacted mental health, how we address mental health and digital wellness and the whole student support modality. And lastly, another area in education policy that can um, can be supported by futures literacy is global learning and international mobility. And these are just some areas. So want you to take a moment and imagine your state implements universal AI powered personalized learning in 2035, right? So what would be your first, second, and third order impacts, right? So let's go back to the question. Imagine your state implements universal AI powered personalized learning in 2035. We are now in 2026. So we have a little bit of time, right? So what would be your first, second, and third order impacts? Just think about that. If you'd like to share later or post in the chat, you can go ahead and do that. So by answering those questions as individuals and then coming together and going through this kind of iterative discussion, you can begin to prioritize or create a visual map showing the ripple effects of these different impacts and where they overlap, right? So part of the practice is kind of placing the central idea in the middle and then identifying different policy opportunities and risks. And then the output of this futures thinking is a visualization of how they might impact one another. What is the relationship, the interrelationship between these different areas? And for example, if we are to answer the question, so the ripple effects could have effects on funding, on teacher roles, equity assessments, and also data governance. So, since you've had a moment to think about your first, second, and third order impacts, I took the liberty of thinking about this question, and I identified different 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 areas or different impacts. So, examples of a few first order impacts could be including tailored education paths, addressing individual student needs, and boosting engagement. So, personalized AI instruction could probably do that, or engagement platforms could do that. They're doing that now in different capacities. Then second order impacts could involve changes in teacher roles, and we're slowly seeing that as well, with educators focusing on mentorship and guidance rather than traditional instruction. A third order impact could include reduced educational inequality and a better work and a workforce better prepared for a technology-driven economy. These are possibilities. The ripple effects in education could be the changes in funding could impact resource allocation, influencing teacher roles and professional development opportunities. Equity is affected as shifts in resources that may widen or narrow disparities among student groups. So modifications in assessments that alter instructional strategies would in turn require robust data governance to ensure accurate and fair measurement and informed decision making across the system. So during the pandemic, there were significant gaps in broadband access emerged. They created urgent challenges for education and remote work. Policymakers responded by prioritizing digital equity to ensure all communities could connect. These efforts included infrastructure investments, affordability programs, and targeted support for underserved areas to bridge the digital divide. So this is one case study where, um, you know, we are now looking back, but at that time, it it led to this type of thinking, futures thinking, where while we were reactionary in many respects, it was an opportunity for us to look forward and beyond the pandemic. So by using this type of lens, this scenario building, we it exposes future risks for example, for hybrid learning environments. Anticipatory insights guided the creation of broadband expansion policies. As you can see, that different states have different broadband offices, recognizing connectivity as a human right. Policymakers enhance proactive legislation, including the Digital Equity Act and E-rate modernization, to promote equitable digital access for all. So, from the futures literacy lens, what that suggested was, create scenario building revealed the future risks, as I mentioned, and the expansion of broadband policies. And policymakers tried to think of where, you know, why should not everybody have access to connectivity, which has such an impact on access. So these are ways where or these are areas where this futures lens can shed insight on different options that we might have for tackling the future. Now I point you to a case study on tackling student wellness as a challenge, right? So there was rising anxiety, burnout, screen fatigue, right? Were major concerns among K through 12 and also higher ed students. Um, Increased digital learning has amplified a lot of mental health challenges, leading to just decreased engagement. And schools are looking for innovative strategies that promote digital wellness, encourage healthy screen habits, and provide mental health support to foster well-being. So, not the approach is not to only focus on the negative, because the positive of digital learning was that during the pandemic, it enabled everyone to work, well, most everyone to work. Those who had office jobs, administrative jobs, teaching jobs, students were able to stay active and work. But it also had there were circumstances, right? So that was the big challenge of the one of the biggest challenges of the pandemic. There was student anxiety, burnout, screen fatigue, and rising from K through 12 and higher ed. So how can futures literacy, futures thinking help us moving forward? And and that's a question. Uh, so there are early signals that shape education. And if we take too long to pay attention to those signals and we don't use a futures literacy lens, um, then when we do make changes or we do institute change or make modifications, sometimes it's reactionary and it can be too late. So, emerging technologies like artificial intelligence and virtual reality, as we know, are transforming how students learn and interact with information. Yes, it's not a perfect system and there are opposing views, but these tools are here and they're not going anywhere as of now. We also have, they have also led to personalized and adaptive learning environments and are enabling tailored educational experiences. Additionally, there's a growing emphasis on lifelong learning, and digital literacy is reshaping curricula to prepare our learners for future workforce demands. So, a way that we could engage in a futures in futures thinking together, for example, we could look at different areas of concern, right? And then we can sort them by whether we think it's a weak signal, an emerging trend, or a disruption, and then discuss which policy might need attention, right? And then we can share a map of signals that should guide policy decisions. So if we were to look at AI tutors, there are AI tutors now. There are many AI tools that can assist and support learning. What if we were to, each of us would just weigh in and sort them. Is are AI tutors a weak signal? Is it an emerging trend or is it a disruption? Same thing with learning passports or climate migration, micro credentials, right? For some time now, we've seen the rise of micro credentials. It's yet another revenue path or another opportunity, learning opportunity in higher ed. But is it a weak signal? Is it an emerging trend or is it a disruption? Robotics in classrooms. Same thing with mental health tech. Okay. So what futures literacy does, or this type of process, is engage us in thinking, in discussion. We are at a point where we interact with our devices endlessly. And while the technology that we have accessible to us has definitely streamlined our capacities, increased our capacities, uh, we know as educators that it doesn't automate our work to the extent that we could just sign off on it and we would 100% wholeheartedly feel comfortable with it representing us. So, by having these activities where we connect with our colleagues, we connect with individuals and discuss different future scenarios, it really is an exercise that takes time and reflection and conversation and will impact, the very tools that are assisting us now. My next slide. There we go. So for a moment, let's look now at broadband and digital equity, right? So futures mapping could have accelerated these policies before the crisis struck. During COVID-19, about 15 million students lacked adequate connectivity. So the futures literacy insight for that piece there were weak signals from 2010 to 2015 that predicted this risk, yet policies lagged. So let's take a look at these several policy innovations that did emerge. So we have the Digital Equity Act. It was established in 2021 as part of the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act, and it was designed to help close the digital divide by funding digital inclusion work, not just broadband connection. It provided funding so states, territories, tribal entities, and community organizations could help people get online, have access devices, laptops, tablets, build digital skills, receive technical support, and so on. The three main grant programs within the Digital Equity Act were the Digital Equity Planning Grants, the Capacity Grants, and the Competitive Grants. Well, all in all, these totaled about 2.75 billion dollars. However, a recent development with this innovation is that's important for policy discussion is that some states have publicly reported that the Digital Equity Act programs and funds were terminated or canceled in May 2025, therefore creating uncertainty about implementation that this very act was supposed to support. Another change was the E-rate modernization that referred to the major updates the FCC made to the E-rate, which is the schools and libraries program, so it better supports modern broadband and Wi-Fi needs. So what happened? The original E-rate program helped schools and libraries afford basic telecommunications and internet services. But as learning became more digital, institutions needed stronger support. So not just basic connectivity. So they needed high speed, they needed campus building Wi-Fi and efficient funding so that it can help them. So what changed under the modernization were that there would be a stronger focus on high-speed broadband, making it affordable, scalable, all that good stuff so it can handle modern instruction such as cloud tools, video, LMS usage, and online testing. More internal communications, connections, Wi-Fi in buildings and networking, clearer priorities for funding, and then improving participation and reducing administrative barriers. So making it more usable by improving efficiency and encouraging participation. And then the other innovation that took place was the development of state broadband offices. And I'm saying all this to show this as a case study in how there were signals, but they were weak because policies lagged, right? So if we are to take a stance as futures thinkers, we could look at current situations now and start thinking ahead. And I understand that that takes time, that takes bandwidth, but as individuals, as leaders of our classrooms, if we're teaching, this is work that can be done at all the levels. So the development of state broadband offices were formally created by state governments to help plan and coordinate and manage broadband expansion. Federal broadband programs like BEAD needed to have, were able to administer the program, and many states use a state broadband office for this role. So why is this a policy innovation? Well, initially, broadband policy was fragmented across different areas. So departments of education, economic development agencies, public utility commissions, IT departments. But now, it's under the same umbrella, so to speak. And the core functions of these broadband offices are to coordinate the federal funding, to coordinate state broadband plans and proposals, to collect and identify areas, locations that are eligible for funding, underserved and unserved areas, and then run public engagement and local coordination. So, that's just a quick example of the extent of what can be done, and why it is an innovation and why it matters. All right. So next we have a prototype example. The examples I shared with you before are actual examples. Now this is uh, just a prototype. So imagine that there are proposed guidelines for the Digital Wellness and Learning Balance Act of 2040, right? This doesn't exist. So this is just fictitious. So these would be guidelines proposed to balance technology use in schools. Okay, because now we're at a turning point. There's a lot of usage. And we need to determine with all of the other consequences, all the other issues that are associated with, and we can't say that they're causal, but they may be related, right? A lot of screen time impacts focus. It's not for everybody. There are other issues, there are mental health issues in schools. There are mental health issues professionally, but how can we adapt? How can we cope? How can we navigate what has been happening, right? So this act would encourage screen-free hours to support mental health and offline social interaction. Imagine that, right? And so the act would advocate regular digital literacy education, empower students to use technology responsibly while maintaining overall well-being. So there, in other presentations or that we have had, and I'm sure that you have been abreast of, the conversation about trauma-informed practices, not just in education, but in general, has really shown the overlap between mental health, uh, wellness, and the ecosystem or the system of education. And how there are strategies that we can learn from that trauma-informed space and the mental health space to help us with the challenges that we have socially and psychologically in education, right? So there's this not this overlap of the counseling space, the advising space, the learning space, where educators, anyone who has some connection to the student, um, can be empowered with these skills so that they can address students holistically. So, prevention care, prevention science, all of these areas of study can be instrumental in supporting the student. So, what would the act suggest? It would include maximum daily screen time guidelines. It would include AI nudges for wellness breaks, right? So AI is still not out of the picture, but it can also be used for wellness breaks. Just like you can set your watch, right? Your Apple Watch to tell you, or your Fitbit to tell you it's time to get up, right? So this could be a system change. It can we can The act would support flexible scheduling options. There could be funding for multimodal learning, tactile labs, XR, nature learning, digital rest days for students. You can just imagine, right? It doesn't mean that everything that would be suggested would be implemented, but these are ideas that could be fruitful and could lead to some concrete um, uh, suggestions, right, that can be implemented. And so this is how imagining the future can shape today and tomorrow's priorities, policy priorities. Okay, so this would be an activity, right? So you would choose a future scenario and redesign a current policy to make your system future ready. If this were an interactive workshop, this is something that we would do so that we could begin to fast track our thinking about how we would redesign something, right? So scenarios could include a full AI classroom integration, could be a hybrid global classroom. It could be universal micro-credentialing. A scenario could be demographic shifts or declining enrollment, which we've seen, right? So this is not something out of the ordinary. And then the process for thinking through this, once you select one scenario, is identify the pain point and then map the future impact of that pain point, the ripple effect, and then build 3 to 5 policy recommendations that you can share. And so this is how a group could begin to work on futures thinking. All right. So just looking at the time, we're good. So global citizenship skills, as we know, are becoming essential in today's world. However, access to international mobility and learning opportunities remains uneven. There are disparities among students, and that's no surprise. Addressing these challenges require policies that promote equal access, support, and skill development, and fosters inclusive participation in global education programs. So, with the futures literacy lens, we could explore futures where students collaborate globally without travel. And that is already happening. Okay. So some of this future already took place in the past because there are many institutions where there are virtual global learning exchanges, where students get to collaborate right from their classroom. So that this is not new. Um, Highlighted need for maybe virtual reality based global learning frameworks. And again, this is not new. There are a handful of companies out there that have created virtual reality libraries of global experiences, right? And this emerged out of that the travel ban during COVID, right? So, you know, they had their futures thinking hat on, and also out of necessity. It's like if I am responsible for organizing study abroad trips and nobody can travel, what do I do? Right? So the futures literacy lens could also inform policy updates for virtual exchanges and international learning standards. And this also increased access for rural and underrepresented learners who never had an opportunity to go on these trips to begin with for a variety of reasons. So the takeaway here is that futures literacy can unlock policy creativity for global learning as well. So now we're moving on to equity and inclusion. As we know, they're vital for creating workspaces where everyone feels respected and valued. And organizations that prioritize these principles increase innovation by leveraging these diverse perspectives. Fostering an inclusive environment also improves employee engagement, retention, and overall organizational performance. So, whose future is assumed in policy? Which communities are left out? Futures literacy highlights structural inequities early, promotes universal design for learning, accessibility, multilingual futures, culturally responsive policy. So you see where I'm going with this? So it's just thinking ahead, finding that pain point. And this is not, this is, it's almost like when we talked about the flipped classroom, it wasn't called flipped, or the sage on the side, guide on the side, sage on the stage, flipped classrooms have been taking place for a long time, right? But the semantics, the words that we use to articulate what we consider a good idea now as compared to in the past, those change, but sometimes it's very much related to something that it's repurposed, repackaged, right? So futures literacy allows us to believe, to think that equity isn't an add-on. It's central to thinking about futures. So these are some of the questions, like whose future is assumed in policy. That is an important question that should be asked when developing policy. Is there anything or anyone left out? All right, so futures thinking for policymakers. Futures thinking and futures literacy enable policymakers to anticipate emerging trends and uncertainties and allowing for more proactive instead of reactive strategies. They foster creative and flexible decision making by illuminating alternative scenarios. Ultimately, these approaches enhance resilience and adaptability, ensuring that policies are robust in the face of rapid change. So they better anticipation of risks, stronger adaptability, more equitable and human-centered design, resilient long-term planning, innovative and flexible policy ecosystems. So I do hope that you decide to give futures thinking a try, right? So futures literacy empowers us to anticipate and prepare for changes. Integrating this skill into the workplace also encourages innovative thinking and adaptability. By fostering this culture of foresight, organizations can better identify opportunities, manage uncertainties, and make strategic decisions for long-term success. What can be done? You can establish a futures literacy lab using the UNESCO model. You can introduce scenario analysis into policy teams. You can create district-wide foresight working groups, integrate digital wellness and student voice into futures work, and use futures prototype to test policy ideas. Futures mapping. So futures mapping involves, it's almost like creating a vision board, except that it just goes on and on and on, right? You can create different types of diagrams, timelines, or storyboards to represent different possible future scenarios. So it's very hands-on. And these maps combine images, graphics, text to illustrate trends, uncertainties, key drivers. The process encourages collaborative thinking and helps stakeholders visualize complex possibilities and pathways for strategic decision making. Futures mapping is um, in, is as well a strategic process that is used to visualize and plan for multiple scenarios. It helps organizations identify trends, uncertainties, and the drivers that may impact their future. Creating these maps, teams can better prepare, anticipate challenges, and seize opportunities and that will help them make informed decisions for long-term success. So now I want to turn this over to you, and I have a Slido that I'm hoping that you can join in answering. And this is the question. I'd like us to pause and reflect. So, what is one assumption about the future of education you are ready to revisit or challenge? And with that, I am going to move on to my next slide. And oh, there you go. I hope you see it. So you can either go to slido.com and enter the number, or you can scan the QR code and just type in. Don't be shy. And that is the end of my presentation, by the way. I wanted to end with the question. And you should be able to see the results as if you type. Are there any questions in the audience?
I don't have any questions, although I do have a question, but
Okay.
while we're waiting them, I was curious as you were going through this, have you run across, or can you share, an example of a future literacies, like a practice or a process or a tool that could help a team kind of uncover the assumptions or the policies or possibilities that they wouldn't have thought about otherwise? Something to help bubble these things up.
Well, we can use AI to help create scenarios, right? And some people, when you're out of ideas, you could type them in, and you can pick a policy issue and then ask whatever your favorite AI is to create different scenarios for you, or to look ahead. And then that you can use as a baseline to begin to say, no, that's not realistic. I don't see, because, and then you find yourself in a dialogue, right? So, critiquing whether that is even possible or not, right? Because, but you need to know, and this is the part that requires that human element. There are things that you know about your community, your organization, that the AI tool will not know. So the more information, obviously, that you give it about the circumstance, your particular details about what you're living, then it can provide you with plausible scenarios for you to consider. And then having that information, then you can decide, well, I like this scenario or that scenario, but then have a conversation with others about what they think. If it might even work. But you can use post-its. You don't have to use a technology tool. The idea is it requires you to really research and ask questions because if you don't know how something might impact you, then you're kind of living in a bubble. So it really encourages, and so this futures literacy lab and mindset is being taught all over the world at this time, and it's in classrooms, with elementary, middle school students, and they're asked, and they do, they color, they paste, they print things, they create, and they have these incredible conversations, thinking about their future, so
So
and you
this
know
is
and it,
this is kind of like being curious as a process of being proactive versus being reactive.
yes, yes. So let's see. One challenge I'm looking here: assessment of learning, innovation, partnership over support. That's interesting. I wonder what you mean by that. I'd love to hear more. uh Define higher ed is broadly valued. So that is a challenge, right? AI adoption is inevitable. Right? So I give up, right? But no, don't give up. Don't give up because, AI has come on strong, but it's been around for a long time. It's just that a lot of people now have taken notice. But, in a couple of years, it'll be something else. And we don't know what it's called yet, but it's going to happen. And AI it's going to kind of take a step to the side. Like, remember when Turnitin and Safe Assign became a thing? Um, where we can check for plagiarism. Now you can't check for plagiarism. So what is going to happen to those plagiarism checkers? Like, there's a way you can check, but it's very, very tedious. And if you have a class of 30 students, how are you going to check? But what can we do? Right? So there's a way to really know if our students are really engaged and they are producing the work that they're giving us, And thinking. I love it. Yeah. Any other questions? Education worth the investment. Trade education doesn't fit at my institution. So that's another assumption. Yeah. And we cannot accept those transfer courses. Yeah, so and I think sometimes we try to put what is the expression, a square peg in a round hole, because other people have the round hole, right? But we just we're following the Joneses and it doesn't work. You know, now that, and it's been years, it's been several years since COVID, where everyone went remote because everybody had to, right? It was survival. And then right after the pandemic, many institutions who had not invested in the technology and they decided, well, this can provide us with an additional revenue stream. It's good. But then over time, they have institutions have to decide, well, what are we? Do we want to focus on online? Are we really going to invest properly in online? Um, because students are paying, 3 credits online is the same as 3 credits in person, and it's about the student experience. Or are we going to focus on other programs, or micro-credentialing, or continuing education, workforce development, or experiential learning? There's just like different options that an institution can focus on. But futures literacy also enables us to, have that reality check where we can learn that what is working for one is not working for another, and that we have to find our own future, and draft that. Let's see. AI adoption is inevitable. I can't see any more. But anyway, I thank you all for participating. And if you want to learn more about futures literacy, there are many resources out there. But I will also be presenting on futures literacy during our USDLA. But I also encourage you to continue to join us during this Public Policy Week and listen to. We have a great array of other presenters, and I'm happy to be here and thank you very much.
And for everyone else, thank you very much, Dr. Salas. And this has been recorded and will be available on demand very soon. And if you didn't check your chat, we do want to remind you that the 2026 National Conference is coming up June 22nd through the 25th in the rock and roll capital of Cleveland, Ohio. And if you go in there, there's a way to get a 10% discount using the code USDLA-WEB-10. So please consider joining us, and you can pick Dr. Salas's brain even more because she truly is a rock and roll star. She is,
Thanks.
trust me, trust me.
I didn't pay him. I didn't pay him.
If anyone has any more questions, you can unmute or throw them in chat quickly. Otherwise, we're going to say thank you so much, Alex. It's been a wonderful
Thank
and
you.
interesting session. I appreciate it very, very much.
Thank you very much. My pleasure. Right,
Thank you
everybody.
both. And don't forget, come back tomorrow.
Yes, and hope to see you at USDLA. Come to Ohio.
OH.
Bye.
Those that know, know.
Oh, gosh.